You are now listening to 1-900 Old Ladies, The Lost Art of Making Lefse, written by L. Lee Starr, narrated by the author. Post-production by Pinto Media. Chapter 28. Now you just wait for it to cool and eat. That's all there's to it. I knew you could do it, Ellie. You were always my favorite. Some of the others, well, let's say they don't have the Norwegian in them. But you, Ellie, you are a Sivertson true and true. You can carry on grandmother's recipe and the Norwegian tradition. Sigrid Sivertson. When news broke out that the town of Himmel had been visited by and delivered from the murderous grasp of serial killer John Jacob Harvey, the townsfolk were both panicked and relieved. Ellie had shot Margie's stalker and freed her sister and Dr. McDaniel, who immediately called the sheriff out to investigate. Paul Baker noted John Jacob's deserted vehicle 1 mile down the highway and quickly traced the truck's plates back to North Carolina. One quick phone call to the Mecklenburg County Police Department revealed that John Jacob, or Jack as he was commonly known, was at large in his home state. He had brutally slain his elderly mother 3 weeks prior, having mercilessly strangled her with a coiled telephone cable in her Pineville home. He was also suspected in several unsolved murders and missing persons cases in and around the city of Charlotte. Ellen was quickly exonerated for having killed John Jacob Harvey. In fact, because she had rescued her older sister and the medical examiner, a state official, from the clutches of a murderer, she was now regarded as a town celebrity. Despite Ellie's previous attempts to hide the nature of her 900 business from the respectable people of Himmel, she decided it was no longer necessary to continue with her charade. During the events of recent months, Ellie realized that there really wasn't anything she had done to fool the crafty citizens of her hometown. They seemed to love her no matter what. Margie's influence had taught her one very important lesson. One should always be true to oneself. If one does that, happiness and love will follow. Both Marge and Jim had witnessed Ellie's shooting of John Jacob Harvey. But there was still some shred of doubt about whether Ellen had truly murdered her late husband. Either she didn't recall killing Stanley, or perhaps she did remember but chose to lie about it. There was also the unlikely third possibility that someone else had murdered Stanley. It seemed no one in the town really knew for sure who killed Stanley Peters. But then it was all too clear that no one in the town really cared. In any event, all the authorities involved concluded that, since Stanley was a proven killer himself, justice would be better served if the case was reported as accidental and simply dropped. Jim McDaniel issued his final report. Paul Baker closed the case. There were no objections to this chosen course of action from the good people of Himmel, and there were definitely no objections from either Stanley's grandson, Stan Jr., or the Sivertson sisters. It was decided by all that the sooner people could move on with their boring lives and forget about Stanley Sr., the better. Once again, life was good in the sleepy little North Dakota town. The following month of August, Stan Jr. returned with his family to live with his mother in Himmel. He had secured employment with Mr. Heinley's appliance company, determined to keep the friendly folks of Himmel County warm throughout the blasting cold winters. More than likely, Rosa would see her first blizzard ever the coming winter. She was going to have to acclimate herself to this particularly cold climate. But she considered this a small price to pay for the luxury of having a satisfied husband and 2 willing babysitters close by to take care of her growing family. In addition, Margie expanded the 900 business to include another line for Rosa, 1-900 Hot Rosa. Through her newly established line, Rosa catered to Hispanic callers while she spoke to them in their native Spanish. Even though Stan Jr. could not understand what she said to her callers, he no longer seemed to mind that she talked about sex all day. When she returned to the bedroom after a hard day at work, he happily realized that an entire day of phone calls made his wife pretty horny. Rosa could wake Stan up at any hour of the day or night, and he was perfectly content to cater to the needs of his young wife's increased libido. After the dust settled from the events of the previous summer, Stan presented Sheriff Baker with his grandfather's set of Revolutionary War pistols. Although Paul was cautious that such an expensive gift might be perceived as a bribe, Stan argued that Paul had done a great deal for his mother as a citizen of Himmel, not as a law enforcement officer. His grandfather's and great-grandmother's murder cases had now been closed, and there was no way he should consider this gift a bribe. Paul and Doris had always looked out for Ellen. In addition, Stan explained that his recent discovery about his father's true identity rendered the need for keeping a memento of Stanley Sr. obsolete. After their near-death experience with serial killer John Jacob Harvey, Marge and Jim grew closer as a couple. Pretty soon, they spent every moment they could in each other's company. Jim usually visited Marge at the farm in the evening while she answered her 900 line. He sat on the kitchen chair, and Margie perched herself on his lap. As she carried on her conversation with her callers, she would simultaneously whisper her sexy words into Jim's ear. He could only stand about 30 minutes of this verbal foreplay. In between calls, he would whisk Margie off to the bedroom, where the entire household learned to ignore Marge's deafening screams of ecstasy, which echoed throughout the old farmhouse. Ellen Sievertson was blissfully happy to have her son, daughter-in-law, grandson, and favorite sister all living under her roof. True, she was now a widow, but with her loved ones close by, she could face any obstacle. She had a successful business to keep her occupied, and she had the undying support of her fellow members of the Himmel community to sustain her. In addition, she continued to knit, assemble quilts, and with her sister's assistance, make numerous batches of lefse for mass consumption. One day in late August, the Sievertson sisters, Stan, Rosa, and Jim McDaniel, gathered around the small kitchen table of their old farmhouse. The women answered their respective phone lines. As was the custom, Marge answered her line 1-900 Hot Mama, seated on Jim's lap. Little Robert clumsily hobbled his first infantile steps across the kitchen floor. Ellie brought a generous plate of lefse to the table, upon which they were about to feast. She almost sat down when she heard a knock on the kitchen door. She stepped over to the door to answer it. Recognizing the figure standing behind the screen, she smiled. It was William Knutson. He held a large bouquet of sunflowers in his arm. He stood in a navy blue suit and was neatly groomed. "Hello, Miss Ellie? I know I came by unannounced, but, well, I brought you something." William handed Ellie the oversized bouquet of sunflowers while they stood in the entryway. She studied the bouquet carefully. He had obviously picked the flowers from someone's farm. He had meticulously tied the arrangement up by lovingly winding twine all the way around the stems. Touched, Ellie began to tear up. "Oh, goodness. This is the sweetest thing anyone has ever given to me," she remarked. "Thanks so much, William." "I was trying to decide what kind of flower to get you. What would Miss Ellie like?" I asked myself. As I thought about it, I thought you kind of reminded me of a sunflower. It's a very happy flower. There are sunflowers all over the state, and it kind of seems like they're all the same. But really, every flower is very special. That's kind of how you are to me, Miss Ellie." Ellie simply smiled and lifted the bouquet to her nose. "You look awfully nice, William. Are you wearing your church clothes?" "Sure. I stopped hanging out at the trading post so much. I know how you feel about drinking. You know, because of Stanley and all." William continued. "I wasn't sure if you were ready for gentlemen callers. I know your husband hasn't been dead very long. But, well, let's face it, Miss Ellie. I've wanted to date you my entire life. ever since we were in school together. It's just you were either too young, or dating Robert, or married to Stanley. And that wouldn't have been right for me to try to date someone who was already spoken for. But I'm 55, Miss Ellie, and honestly, I'm running out of time. What are you saying, William? Ellie was clearly flirting with William as he continued his romantic overtures. I'm saying, I'd like to court you, if I can, Miss Ellie. I mean, if you're willing. Ellie paused thoughtfully. She placed her hand on William Knutson's shoulder and leaned over to kiss his cheek. Well, yeah, I'm ready as I'll ever be, William. But I gotta warn you, we have this respectable business going in here, and I don't need any man trying to get in the way of our success. Course not, Miss Ellie. I would never stand in the way of your success. He peeked behind her at the family gathered at the kitchen table. Did I interrupt something? Not at all, William. We're sitting down to a nice big plate of lefse. Would you like to join us? Ellen invited. You don't need to ask me twice, Miss Ellie, William joyously exclaimed. Everybody loves your lefse. This has been 1-900 Old Ladies, The Lost Art of Making Lefse, written by L. Lee Starr, narrated by the author. Copyright 2012 by Mystic Hippo Media Productions. Production copyright 2020 by Prettyman Studios. Post-production by Pinto Media.